And welcome back. In the previous video, we set up the online config tool and we downloaded our INI files from it so that we had some information that we could run through to use to create our configuration for our tables in the TAO mainboard config editor. We downloaded the files, unblocked them, and extracted them, leaving us with a folder that had our INI files and our table shapes and configuration files. These table shape files and table mappings can be directly cut from the folder and dropped into our config file, or our config folder rather, for direct output. That's going to leave us just with the INI files that we want to work with. You'll have a config file, a config2, and a config30. If you open the file generator screen, you'll see at the bottom of the page 3 tabs that are highlighted in color. The config INI, the config2 INI, and the config30 INI. These are scratchpad tabs that will import the information from the individual corresponding INI files into, so that we can determine what new tables exist and what the settings for those new tables should be. Now, a little bit about this screen. If you look at it, you see that we have a yellow bar to the left. This is the list of all the existing ROMs in the system. These are what are already in your database and already configured. Across the top row, you'll see that it's divided up into ROM, the start button, the launch button, the extra ball button, etc. Goes on across for the entire mainboard functions for this page. This is already set up to correspond to the output settings that you made in the config tool, so that when we do the import, everything lines up properly in the columns to make it easier for you to be able to see what each setting is corresponding to. Now, the first thing that we're going to have to do is make sure that we have a recent list of the ROM names that we can sort what the data that we import into it against. So we click on Select ROM Names for the sort list, which is the green button, and we copy that information. We come up under Tools and go to Options, and we come down to the LibreOffice Calc Options heading, and we go to Sort Lists. If we look in the next column over, we see there's a sort list already here in the bottom. That may be outdated, so we'll delete that. And when you're presented with this screen, you just press Enter in order to delete it. And now we have gotten rid of the existing list. We can create a new list. We do that by coming to the third column, which is the entries column, and we paste in the list of names that we copied from the yellow box to the far left, and we click on Add. That's now created a list of ROM names that corresponds to everything currently in the database. So we click on OK to exit that. Now, to import the information from the direct output config INI file, we want to open a new temporary window, and it's going to be a spreadsheet. And then we want to click on Open once again, and we want to select our direct output config INI file. When we click on Open, we're presented with a window, and this window is asking us how we want to import the information. The file that we're using is a comma-separated file, so we want to make sure that we have UTF-8 selected as the character set. I don't believe the default language matters. And from row is the first row in the INI file that we want to start grabbing the information from. It is currently set to 601 because in the INI file, if you look down below, you'll see that line 1 starts with a bunch of information that basically provides global settings for DOF. We're not interested in importing that information. We just want the table settings. Currently, the table settings start at line 601. This could change down the road as people add more information prior to the actual table settings in the global settings information. For now, we're going to start at line 601, which should be the first blank line before the table settings themselves in the list. We want to make sure that we're choosing separated by, tabs, and commas. This will format everything into a format that will match what we have set up already in the Scratchpad sheet. So we click on OK, and it drags in that information. Once that information is on the screen, we then come up to the box in the upper left corner, and we select A1 colon Z 1503. And that grabs everything that is in the INI file so that we can copy it. Once we have that copied, we can reduce that down, come back to our import page Scratchpad for the direct output config INI file, and click on select paste into box. We then go to the highlighted box, right click, and paste. This brings all the information in from the INI file into our Scratchpad. Now we want to sort that so that we can see a list of what has been entered as new tables that don't exist in our current database. So we select the fields to be sorted, and then we come up to the Data button, and we click on Sort. We click on the Options tab, and we select the custom sort order, and we make sure that we're using the list that we just generated of our current ROMs. When we click OK, it sorts everything against the list of ROMs, and if we scroll to the bottom of the screen, we can see a list of ROMs that aren't existing in our current database. If we look to the bottom of the list on the left, we see that the last one in this entry is Zizu. If we go to the first column beside it on the right, we find Zizu up here. This means that everything in this list are new tables that need to be entered into our database. Now, something to point out is that issues in the configTool will replicate in this list. An example of that would be the PAPST entry. PAPST is already in your database, but there's a configuration or a data entry error that exists in the online configTool where it puts a space in front of the PAPST ROM name. And anytime you generate this file, that error is going to replicate itself. For that matter, PAPST probably will always be at the top of your list, and you can just ignore it. What we're going to be using is from the fifth element down to the bottom of the list. So basically, these files here are all the tables that don't currently exist in your database. So what I generally do is I come up beside it and I look for whatever I want to enter into my new database, and I select it. In this case, we'll do Dukes of Hazzard, and I come up to the top of the screen and I highlight it in yellow. Now I can follow along and I know which line that I should be looking at in order to be able to garner the information from that file. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing with the direct output config2 INI file. This is your add-on board file. We don't need to replicate the list. We already have the list updated for the sort. What we do need to do is come down, close out our scratchpad for the INI file, and now we go to the config2 INI file. So we're going to go File, New, Spreadsheet. We're then going to go Open, config2 INI, and open. Our settings should still be there from the last time we used it. So we click OK, and that gives us our new import. In this case, we see that we go as far as column M. So what we're going to do is we're going to go A1 to M1503, enter, and then we're going to copy that. We're going to come back to our dashboard. We're going to make sure we're on the config2 INI. We're going to select the paste into box and paste the information in. We're then going to click the select sort fields box, go up to data, sort, options, custom sort order, and our lists are still selected, and click OK. Once again, if we scroll to the bottom of the screen, we can see that we've organized our list. And what we can do is, since we were looking at the Dukes of Hazzard, we can click on the 1420 icon. It highlights the whole row. If we come up to the background color, we can make it yellow. It's easier to read. Finally, we're going to go to the direct output config30 INI file. This is your serial addressable file. Once again, we're going to close out that window. We're going to open a new spreadsheet. We are going to open our config30 INI file. Once again, our settings are all pre-done for us because they worked on the last one. And we click OK. Now we get a warning box saying that the data could not be loaded completely because the maximum number of characters per cell was exceeded. What this means is, quite basically, that whether you're using Excel or you're using LibreOffice, each individual cell is only limited to a maximum of 32,767 characters per cell. Sounds like a lot until you get into serial addressable LED lighting. Those effects can get kind of long. There's a couple of tables where these effects have exceeded the capacity of the cells. There's nothing we can do about that. It's a hardware or a software limitation in the program itself, and we just have to work around it. But for the sake of getting the data into the program, we just ignore it and we click OK. Once again, we click on A1. We come up and we go Z1503, enter, and then we copy the highlighted area. We can close that out. We come in here. We make sure that we have the right box selected by clicking Paste Into Box, the blue button. We go to the highlighted box and we paste in there. Now we can select the sort fields with the purple button, come up under Data, sort, go to options. All our options remain the same, and we click OK. Now if we come down in the list, we see that everything's sorted. And if we come to the Dukes of Hazzard table, we can highlight that as well. At this point in time, we can close out our temporary spreadsheet. And just for safety's sake, so that we don't make a mistake that's irreversible, we can save by clicking on the floppy disk item up in the left corner. It takes a second for it to save, and then we're good to go. That's it for how to get the information into the system and get it sorted. Next video, we'll look at how to parse the information and actually enter it into our database. Thanks for watching.